might even take a look at it, suspenseful, terrifying, threatening, uncomfortable, not knowing what's going to happen yet within the story, but certainly is making someone maybe feel a little nervous about what could be occurring, because it does not seem to be a very popular place. Also, we know that you are dealing with a dystopian work, so we mentioned that it's about a frightening future that could be rather foreboding as well. So those are just kind of some options and ideas out there for you to consider. When it comes to the Pedestrian, I mentioned to you that this is a dystopian story, which really has a lot to do then with the writer's overall purpose. Anytime you finish a story, you want to pause, or any kind of text, whether it be a novel, novella, short story, play, essay. But anytime you finish a given text, you want to pause to consider what the writer's purpose would be. And here are certainly some options. It may be to, and I certainly would want you to write these down as possible purposes, share a feeling or experience, recreate a world of the writer's own making. This could certainly be an option that would be taking place for Kafka with the Metamorphosis. While he may not have literally turned into a bug, that whole idea of feeling less than human, being dehumanized, not being treated as other people within his job or within the family may have felt or been treated, so he wanted to convey that. And then a third option would be to persuade the reader to accept the writer's view on some issues. Certainly, with this being a dystopia, and I know you've certainly seen this word before, with this being a dystopian text, we would know that there's going to be some type of prediction that is going to be taking place around the future. And that prediction is certainly going to be some kind of warning. It's going to be related to the whole idea of technological dependency. And ways in which that could happen would be limited access to the outside world, people not wanting to experience life. And we could even kind of have the whole question come up as, what does it even mean to have life or to live? What is the significance? What is the meaning of life? Is it to experience things for yourself through true reality? Is it more of emotional experiences, which can happen through virtual reality? Is it to be entertained, which certainly could happen with in today's world, not only just TV, streaming devices and things like that, but video games. But in 1951. When this story is getting published, TV is now that new kind of wave that is coming about in the United States that Bradbury certainly seems to have some deep-seated concerns about. So overall purpose, prediction, kind of a warning about technological dependency, and I would certainly argue that maybe kind of considering what does it mean to have a quality life, to live your life well. Going into a little bit more detail, I've already certainly mentioned this idea with technology. Bradbury's purpose is to persuade readers to accept his views on the isolating effect of technology. And this in itself is certainly an interesting term, because when we discuss what are benefits of technology in today's world, we think of it as a way to not be isolated, but to communicate with other people. Whether it be something as simple as phone calls, text messaging, apps, Facebook, Instagram, whatever the case may be, but it gives you a way to communicate with people who you otherwise may not be able to communicate with. At the same time, does it have isolating effects where it prohibits us from maybe having those face-to-face interactions? And that would be something that Bradbury seems to be concerned about. Now again, when he's writing this, he is not thinking about cell phones, smartphones, or anything like that at all, because that is not even on his radar. But the main thing that he would be taking a look at is going to be television. Now for us, television might not be what it was 10, 15 years ago, but certainly the whole screen time would still be an issue for us to take a look at. So while you're reading the story, listening to the story, following along with it, certainly take a look for key passages that directly express opinions that Bradbury would have about those isolating effects, and certainly look for loaded words that carry some emotional overtones that go beyond the literal meaning, that have strong connotations. So options that we've already kind of mentioned through today, the use of the term deserted. If you're deserted, probably going to be isolated, alienated. Things like haunting, certainly not going to give a positive connotation. Homes being described as tomb-like is going to be the opposite of a place that is going to provide warmth and safety, but it's a place that simply is just going to collect essentially dust and bones. So you might have a body that's in a home. If it's being described as a tomb, then it would be thought that that body really is not therefore alive. So there could be a difference between physical, being alive in a physical manner, and also being alive, mental capacity, psychological, the ability to think, communicate, and things of that nature. So there's certainly a conflict that Bradbury's looking at between a person being an active member of the world and someone who is just experiencing aspects of life that are going to be based more around technological components rather than interacting with people, having discussions, talking, thinking, creating, even in the case of like artwork and things like that. Here are some terms that's going to kind of have the opposite effect of what we were just discussing. So not deserted, haunting, and tomb-like, or gray and death-like. But here are words that get used to describe the main character's house, Leonard Mead, towards the end of the story. Brightly, illuminated, square, warm. These words suggest warmth, hope, solidarity, which would certainly, again, kind of be the opposite of that idea of an isolating effect of technology that was just being referenced before. So you can see a contrast here that would be taking place. This is how Bradbury wants you to see Mead, the man who lives in the house. And again, if you take a look at, that contrast, where if you think of the world of nature versus the world of technology, you do think of nature, hopefully, as being bright, warm, something that would be able to sustain life, where you kind of think of technology, I would say, more likely maybe being cold, metallic, unnatural. Certainly technology, screens, cell phones, things like that can be brightly lit and illuminated. We talk about blue light and the issues that can have with a person's natural rhythm, sleep patterns, and things of that nature. So even there, even though illumination might be taking place with both, while one is kind of more warm, the other is a cold, dark, more metallic, unnatural set of feelings. So he being Bradbury, looking again at that contrast that would exist between nature and technology within his story. So it's Mead's home is going to be the opposite of that gray, dim, tomb-like society, which is going to in some ways cause him to be the outcast and be a little bit more isolated from everyone else, because he is trying to do something that is a little bit different. So we'll take a look at what issues arise from that, if any, throughout the course of the short story. Excuse me. Take note of how Bradbury uses setting to express his opinions. And again, here's a little description passage coming from the text. Mead walks through a landscape in which the houses are compared to dark tombs. The people sit like the dead. The light from their TVs flicker over the viewer's gray and untouchable faces. So with those faces, you can see something that really there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interaction necessarily taking place with. Bradbury's setting suggests a mood of death and despair. This is the way he wants the reader to see a future in which people have no interest beyond their TVs. And again, what really kind of makes this interesting is that he is writing about the effect of TV in 1951. I've already mentioned that date to you before, I realize. You take a look at some numbers in 1947. Throughout the United States, there are just over 44,000 TVs. The population at this point is 144 million. So of those 144 million, there are 44,000 TVs, or roughly one TV for about like a little over every 3,000 people. In 1950, so about the time that this story would be getting published, that number goes from 44,000 to 6 million TVs. Now, this is post-World War II, baby boomer era, a lot more manufacturing, consumerism, things like that take place. Population has gone up a little bit to 152 million, so now you have a TV for about 1 out of every 25 individuals. 10 years later, in 1960, the number of TVs continues to go up. It goes tenfold at this point, so now you are up to 60 million TVs. And with a population at this point of about 180 million, you have about one TV for every 3 individuals, which you could really kind of take to look at that every house essentially in the United States would have a TV at this point. For 2017, I don't know what the exact data would be, but you figure in today's world, every house probably, not every house, but on average you would certainly have homes with 2, 3, in some cases 4 or 5 TVs, and even in homes that maybe don't have a lot of TVs, there are certainly a lot of devices that can stream the content: phones, tablets, computers, smart TVs, and all that type of stuff. So when Bradbury's really writing about what his seems to be a concern about people having no interest beyond technology, beyond their TV. He's doing this in 1950 when the number of TVs is still rather limited compared to what a number like that would be today. So it's still kind of in its infancy, but you can take a look, 1947 to 1950, a 3-year period, over 5.5 million TVs are kind of coming into the country at that point, into society. So it certainly is a great wave of issues that he would be concerned about. And you have similar concerns, at what point is the appropriate age for iPads, cell phones, things like that to get the hands of younger individuals. So concern that he has about the world in 1951, dependency upon technology, TVs, how it certainly could impact our lives, and that's something that's going to be take a look at throughout the Pedestrian. I want you to take a moment here in your notebook, and this would be part of the notes where I want you to make connection. Ray Bradbury's portrayal of a 21st century world may raise as many questions as it provides answers. What questions and ideas do you have about what life will be like in the year 2053 when the story takes place? Write down a combination of at least 5 total questions and or predictions of, and this would be life, in 2053. So roughly when you would be approximately 50 years old, what are either questions or predictions that you would have about life in 2053? And I would say you can think about this from a technological standpoint, from a medical standpoint, just ways in which life would be different. Not looking for who will you be married to, how many kids will I have, or anything like that. But what would be predictions or questions that you would have about an average person's life at this point? So this would be part of the notes that I want you to include. So you should have numbers 1 through 5 listed. And you can just make like one sentence. Doesn't have to be a short answer response by any means, but one sentence for 1, one sentence for 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have a grand total of 5 questions and or predictions about life in 2053. You can have a mix of questions and predictions. It could be all one or the other. It makes absolutely no difference to me. So tomorrow then, you're going to be reading The Pedestrian. You're going to follow along, as I said, through Google Classroom. So tomorrow when you come in, we'll just log on Google Classroom. I'll have a link there for you. You'll also have the textbook that you will be able to follow along with for the story, and that's going to be on pages 57 to 61. While you're reading the story tomorrow, there are going to be some questions, multiple choice questions that you're going to have to answer, so certainly make sure to follow along with those. Bring earbuds, headphones, so that you can certainly listen independently while other people are doing the same task. All right. So for your notes, and I'll have these posted to Google Classroom. Please do make sure that you run through and you do have the pages present in your notebook. make sure you do have your quote coming from Max Frisch. Would like you to have a little bit of a description here for the pedestrian, writing down the chilling portrayal that would be taking place. Certainly wants you to have a definition of setting and mood, how the setting is establishing the time and place of the story. When it comes to mood and tone, make sure you have a definition for each. So for tone, you could write is the writer's attitude in a story. Mood is the feeling the reader gets from the writing. You don't have to worry about copying down the rest of this little passage or paragraph that would be taking place. I do want you to certainly include all of this information, that the setting can create a mood or atmosphere. Mention to you that this page here, you are not responsible for writing all those terms, but then everything else dealing with the pedestrian,